Hello, everyone. Mark Smith, Director of Curriculum Instruction and Assessment here at Monomoy Schools. And I want to walk everybody through quickly the elements of our scope and sequence template. So this is what it would look like once you get it open, and there's a separate video on how and where to find it. And it talks about there, you're going to want to change the name. So one of the first things you want to do is change the name, and you should be looking at, identifying the content area. So let's say it was we were creating an algebra scope and sequence, and we can just rename it so that we know exactly what it is. It'll help with the filing and organization later as we move forward. The next, some simple things up here you can select here from. So if it was algebra, obviously that's in the mathematics department. And we're going to put, let's say this is algebra, and I probably should have identified that ahead. Let's say this is algebra 1 versus algebra 2. And then when are we doing this? In which year? So we're working on it currently in 2019. And you'll see the way this is organized is units are organized horizontally, moving left to right. And then the information for you to enter is organized vertically. There are some tips that are provided here for you for operating inside the cells, because the cells, if you're not familiar working in either Excel or Google Sheets, it operates a little bit differently than like a typical Word document on how you move around. So one of the things that we want to think about when we think about a scope and sequence is first thinking about what scope and sequence means. So scope means what is going to be covered. So as we look from September to June, what are the ideas that are going to be covered across the course of the year? What are the ideas, the standards, et cetera, that are going to be covered across the course of the year? And then the sequence is, in what order are we going to put those ideas so they best build student knowledge? So scope and sequence. And one thing that I've really been pressing hard in my conversations with people is taking a realistic look at the amount of time that you actually have with students. So I'm sure, because I asked this with every group, nobody feels like they have enough days in the school year to teach everything that they feel like they're responsible for teaching. So that's assuming a 180-day calendar, right? But then there's obviously a lot of things that get in the way that actually get you to less than 180 days. Maybe it's a pep rally, field trips, certain schedule configurations. Like I know the high school drops 2 blocks every day. So there are certain ways the schedule is organized. And so one of the first things I really encourage people to do is think about how many actual minutes in every day and how many actual days do you have sitting with the students that are going to be sitting in front of you. And thinking about that realistically as we start to build curriculum, because we should really be building a realistic scope and sequence. And the reason we're doing this work and we are coming up with common scope and sequence is because in a situation where people do not have enough time to get done what they need to get done, and they've been set up that way, that's the way, those of us in the decision-making positions and way above my head at the state level have given teachers way too much to try to cover in a short period of time. So then teachers, if there is not a common scope and sequence, then teachers make individual decisions because they just run out of time, and they're professionals and they make professional decisions about what to keep and what to not to keep. However, when people are making those individual decisions individually and not making a collective decision, then what ends up happening is kids get splinter skills. And depending upon who they had as a teacher and what that particular teacher prioritized, they develop those skills, but not necessarily the same skills as a different kid in a different classroom. That's why we need a common scope and sequence. So when we think about, after we've figured out how many days we actually have to work with, then we want to really start thinking about how are we going to organize standards, what are we going to put together into units. And that's really what this level of the work is, really just thinking about how are we going to organize and what units are we going to put together and what standards are we going to put together to make units. So you'll see that's the first thing is unit names. And then the next part here is the months is this going to be instructed in? Is this going to be a September unit, a September and October unit? Is it going to be half at the beginning of September, then unit 2 will start in the second half of September? So that's the type of information that goes in this row. The length is the number of class periods. So is it going to take you 5 class periods, 15 class periods, 22 class periods? How many times are you going to have to meet with the kids in order to accomplish this unit once you've organized what it is? Essential questions. I will do a separate video on essential questions, but essential questions should be broad, big questions that get kids to think about some of the bigger ideas of the unit. Some really good essential questions can actually cover multiple units, depending upon how well they're written, depending upon how the units are organized. They might address, like a great essential question in history is like, whose story is this? And that's a great one for kids to think about, like about perspective, about what they're reading, who's telling this story, and how might that affect the way the story was being told. Core concepts are the big ideas that we're looking for kids to take away. So essential questions and core concepts are really tightly connected to each other. So you're really kind of thinking a little bit more broadly than the actual specific standards. You'll see down below here, there's a spot to list the specific standards. Here on this document, we'll just use a coding system. And most of the standards work with a grade level code, and then there's a standard code, and then like a content within that standard. So it might, be like for math, for example, it might be 10 OA for operations and algebraic thinking, and then it's the third standard under that. So it'd be 10.OA.3. And we're going to use that type of coding here. And the same, especially as the state revamps and revises new standards, each one is starting to have a section on practice standards, the habits of mind that they want developed in students. So thinking about what practice standards best apply to the particular unit you're thinking about constructing. And then, so I skipped over. So core concepts. Core concepts are when you're sort of thinking about within the standards that you've identified for the unit, what are some of the big ideas that we're going to want students to walk away with? Transfer goals. Transfer goals, you're going to be thinking about your transfer goals that are from within your department. So if you don't remember where those are, if you go to the Monomoy Regional website and you go under curriculum and click on the content areas, and the content areas are listed depending upon which department you're in. So if stay with the math example, we'd click on the math department. And when the district first came together, these transfer goals were established. These are the big picture sort of wants for mathematics instruction across the district. So you're looking at this list and identifying within the unit which one of these might best fit. Assessments. These are not again assessment or not again, but assessments may not need to be filled on every single one. Same for performance tasks, because these are the common assessments. So that if more than one person is teaching this unit, what are the common assessments that might go in? And sometimes these two. Sometimes you might have an idea at the scope and sequence level that might have to get refined later once the person actually writes the unit. In some cases, kind of depending upon where we are as a district, some units might already be developed, and therefore you have that information to put in here. But assessments, there's a difference here just between assessments and performance tasks. Assessments are a little bit more traditional in nature. Your midterm exams, your end of unit exams, quizzes, etc. Where performance task is a little bit more unique than that. And don't get hung up on the word performance. It doesn't have to be a play or a song or a dance, but it's more about students applying their knowledge in some new and unique way. They're using higher order thinking in order to combine different ideas, and either evaluating something or they're applying something in a different way. And then, as I mentioned, the standards here, these are you're going to pull right from the content standards, and then the practice standards within your area. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me early and often, and I'd be happy to help anybody navigate this document. Thank you.